Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. My name is Monica, I am 32 years old, and what I am about to tell you begins on a Thursday evening in Charlotte, North Carolina, at 6:47 post-meridium. I was standing in the hallway of my own home, arms aching as I balanced a 3-layer red velvet cake with cream cheese frosting, the kind that takes patience to bring to life. A cake I had baked for 3 hours after leaving work early. It was for my husband, Deshaun. He had just turned 30, and I wanted to surprise him. I had planned the whole thing for weeks. Streamers, candles, the embossed 30 napkins, a playlist, every small touch, because he had been struggling since his startup collapsed 6 months ago. He had been quieter, searching for work, recalibrating, and I wanted to see him smile again. Earlier that afternoon, I picked up my daughter, Zoe, from daycare on the north side, kissed her cheeks, and dropped her at my parents' house with a promise. Extra bedtime stories when I returned. After that, I raced through Target, my cart overflowing with black and gold decorations, paper plates, cups, confetti, snacks. I drove too fast across town because I wanted the house to look perfect before he walked through the door. But when I pushed open the front door, careful not to tilt the cake, I realized I was late. Deshaun was already home. 5 men sprawled across my sectional sofa like idle kings, beer cans slumped on the new coffee table, on the floor, even tucked into the fern by the window. They were laughing, a loose, drunken chorus that bounced through the house. The television glowed. I shifted my grip on the cake and froze when I realized what they were watching, our wedding video. There it was, the dress that cost more than our first car, the hall lights, the chatter and clinking of glasses, my aunt near the dessert table. The camera dipped and panned toward the bar where Deshaun stood. He was not alone. He was with my younger sister, Selena. The footage caught them in a grainy slice of time. His hand slid to her waist while my back was turned. He leaned in. He kissed her. Not a slip of a peck, not accidental bravado. A slow, full, deliberate kiss at my own wedding reception while I breathed the same air and never knew. In the present tense of my living room, the men erupted in laughter all over again. Tyrone pointed with his beer, saying, "Here it comes, this part." And Maurice clutched his stomach like it was the funniest thing he had ever seen. Deshaun leaned forward, his voice smug, and said, "Watch. Just watch." I remained in the hall, half-shadowed, arms trembling under the cake's heft. The laughter rolled, and then Deshaun's voice cut through everything. He said, "I kissed Selena at the reception. She could not resist me that night." And Maurice wheezed as if oxygen itself was comedy. Tyrone's voice was slick and ugly when he added, "Your wife was 10 feet away. She never suspected a thing." Deshaun shrugged through a swallow of beer and spoke the words that gutted the center of me. "She is so naive." I did not drop the cake. I did not scream. I brought my phone out of my back pocket like a surgeon reaching for a scalpel. My fingers were shaking so violently I almost fumbled it. I opened the camera, pressed record, and let the lens stare through the doorway. And then the rest came, Deshaun saying in a near-lazy drawl, "I have been sleeping with her sister for 2 years." The high five that followed. The chorus of admiration from men who were not boys. The way he kept going because cruelty loves an audience. Honestly, I only stay because her dad pays our mortgage. She cooks, she cleans, takes care of Zoe, does my laundry. Why would I leave? It is perfect. Those words were bricks thrown into glass. I recorded him and his friends ranking me against Selena, making lists of virtues and misdemeanors in the bodies of 2 sisters, one labeled fun and spontaneous, one labeled house manager who shares the bed sometimes. I recorded as their laughter softened into a satisfied hum. Then I shifted on shaking legs, backed away, carried the cake into the kitchen, and set it on the counter without looking at it. My father has been covering our mortgage for nearly 2 years. He started when Deshaun's startup shuttered and the months stacked over an empty ledger. He never questioned it. He never made a show of his generosity. He believed Deshaun when Deshaun said he was rebuilding. I work full-time. My salary is steady. I manage Zoe's schedule, doctor's appointments, meal planning, preschool supply lists, quiet tasks that accumulate into a life. And yet, somehow, I had become the punchline while my husband used my father's money and my sister's mouth. I went to my car. I sat there in the driveway with both hands on the steering wheel because if I did not anchor myself, I might have walked back inside and set the living room aflame. I called my parents. My father answered in a voice that had steadied me since childhood. When he said, "Monica, what is wrong?" I told him, not with grace but with speed and shock. He is cheating on me. With Selena. For 2 years. He said he stays because you pay the mortgage. Silence pulsed at the other end. Then my father spoke, a voice drained of warmth. Do not go back in. Your mother and I are on our way. No, I said. He does not know that I know. I have it on video. I hung up because there were steps to take. I sent the recording to my parents, to my work email, to an address I created on the spot. I made backups like a woman who has already learned that evidence is oxygen. Then I went back inside my house where the men were watching my first dance. The part where I was smiling like a young woman who believed in her future. I walked to the bedroom. I opened Deshawn's side of the closet and began pulling hangers like I was tearing down vines. I found the heavy-duty trash bags under the sink, shook one open, and started packing his life without ceremony. Suits he had not worn in 2 years. Graphic t-shirts that tried too hard. Shoes lined up like soldiers waiting for orders he had never earned. For bags filled quickly. I was working on the 5th when footsteps thudded down the hall. The door opened. Deshawn came in with a beer and a grease stain on his shirt, and for a moment we both existed in the same room like strangers who had bumped in an airport. He saw the bags and his mouth sagged. What are you doing? Are you cleaning? He asked, as if I were his employee and not his wife. I turned and let silence do its work. For a moment he looked confused. Then I told him exactly what I had heard, what he had said, and where he would be sleeping tonight. The color bled out of his face. The beer slipped from his hand, fizzing against the carpet. He reached for the simplest lie. He said, "You misunderstood. It was just talk, locker room stuff," and I held up my phone, pressed play, let his own voice fill the room. I have been sleeping with her sister for 2 years. She is so naive. Her dad pays our mortgage. He swiped for the phone. I snapped it back so fast it cut the air. If you touch me or this phone, I will call the police and you will leave this house in handcuffs, I told him, and he backed away like I had pressed a hot pan into his chest. He pivoted to pleading. He said we could work through this. He said family like it should soften the world. I asked him when he had last seen Selena. He would not answer. I asked whether he ever brought her into my home. He said no, as if that were a mercy. He tried to touch my arm. Your friends can leave, I told him. You cannot stay. This is my house too, he said, with a laugh that wanted to be a warning and came out thin. You cannot kick me out. My father pays the mortgage, I said, and I let the words land between us like a ledger. Which means my father is on the deed, and I am calling him to let him know you have been accepting his money under false pretenses while sleeping with his other daughter. That ended the part of the conversation where he had confidence. I walked past him, through the hall, back to the living room where the party had turned into a graveyard. Tyrone and Maurice would not look at me. Get out, I said. They hesitated like schoolboys caught with cigarettes. Now. They grabbed their keys and left without trying to be brave. Deshawn stood there and began the speech I had expected. The talk of mistakes and second chances, of Zoe's name clicked like an unearned key. You have 2 options, I said. You pack a bag and leave tonight. We handle this through lawyers. Or I call my father and Calvin, Selena's fiancé. And I send this video to everyone who ever loved you or thought they did. When I said Calvin's name, he flinched. He had forgotten Calvin. He tried to say I would not. I unlocked my phone, opened the app, hovered over the upload button. That broke him into tears. He fell to his knees, his hands on my wrists, wet panic in his voice that begged and confessed and bargained in the same breath. I told him to stand up. He kept negotiating down to crumbs. One night on the couch, one more conversation. You have 1 hour, I said. You can stay with Tyrone or Maurice or in your car. He followed me as I packed, said Selena had pursued him, said the business failure had broken him. He threw excuses like a net and expected me to be caught. My phone rang. The screen lit up, Evelyn, his mother. I let the call go, then picked it up the second time. She told me her son had said there was a misunderstanding, and in a voice coated with concern she called his infidelity boy talk. I hung up. She called again from a different number. I blocked her. Deshawn looked relieved that his mother approved of his narrative. Your mother's standards are not the measure of my marriage, I told him, and the sentence came out steel. He dragged the first 4 bags out to his car. While he was gone, I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to my own breath like I had to learn it again. He came back to the doorway, and I asked him the question that hurt and also required an answer. Was any of it real? He told me yes. He said his love for me was true, but complicated by the way he felt with Selena. We had lunch on Tuesday, he finally admitted, and it felt like he had pressed a thumb into a bruise. I want a divorce, I said. He cried again. He said Zoe needed a father in the home. He gathered random things with the energy of a man looting his own life. He reached for the iPad and I took it from his hands. That is Zoe's. Ask your lawyer. When he tried to leave with a jacket that was mine, I pulled it back without a word. At the door, he attempted a hug. I moved away from so fast I stumbled. He went to his car. I locked the door, then every window, then both locks again. I slid down in the kitchen with the cake beside me like a monument to a very foolish kind of love. I got a fork and ate it from the platter. My phone pulsed with messages, Deshaun alternating between apologies and lectures, his mother's new numbers, his brother, a friend of his asking me to consider forgiveness. I ate another forkful, and another until the sugar stopped tasting like sweetness and started tasting like relief. That night was a thin, restless kind of sleep. At 7:15 the next morning, there was pounding at my front door like a battering ram. I looked through the peephole. Deshaun stood outside in the same wrinkled clothes he had worn the day before. The neighbors were out, Mrs. Robinson with her paper, Mr. Coleman with his dog, and the scene was a small theater that he had staged without thinking. Open up, he shouted. We need to talk. I cracked the door but kept the chain latched. Leave, I said, or I will call the police. He said the word, rights, like he was testing me. Then he tried to put his foot in the frame and push. I slammed the door on his ankle. He yelped, staggered, and looked around to see our neighbors filming and watching. He shouted a few more useless sentences from his car window and then pulled away slowly, performing hurt for anyone who would take it. I called my father. He said he was on his way and that we were changing the locks. He arrived an hour later with my mother, Denise, who brought breakfast sandwiches from a deli on Central Avenue that has saved more people than a chapel. I cried when I saw her because after rage, sometimes the only thing left is the human relief of seeing someone who loves you. We sat at the kitchen table, and I played the video for them both. My mother held her mouth with her hand. My father gripped the edge of the table and whispered. I trusted him, then could not finish the sentence. He called the locksmith. I called a divorce attorney named Franca whose reviews sounded like thunder. The locksmith, Mr. Brooks, arrived and began removing the old deadbolt with the quiet efficiency of a man who has seen the worst day of many lives. As he worked, my phone rang again. It was Selena. My mother shook her head, but I answered and put it on speaker. She said she wanted to meet. She said things had become complicated. She said she needed to explain her side. I laughed once because the idea of a side suggested there was a story where she had been the sister. Explain what? I asked. Explain the 2 years? Explain the kiss in my wedding video. Explain how you sat at my table every Sunday and asked me about my marriage. She said she and Deshaun had not meant for it to go so far. She used the word feelings, as if it could act like bleach on blood. My mother could not hear another word. She told Selena she was a disgrace and to never contact me again. She ended the call without the tenderness she usually carried. We sat in a heavier silence until my father asked about Calvin. He was engaged to Selena. Did he know? He did not. My father found him on social media in moments and sent a message. Calvin called back quickly. My father spoke first, then handed the phone to me. I told Calvin the truth. He asked if I was sure, and I said I had video, and he asked me to send it, and then he cried. He told me they had just sent their final payment to the venue last week. He thanked me for telling him and hung up. The locksmith finished. My father paid him and locked the new deadbolt with a sound that felt like a vow. The house settled. The day stretched like a rope we would have to climb. That afternoon and evening were made of logistics. I built a list with urgency and anger. Lawyer retainer, bank accounts, credit cards, Zoe's preschool permissions, and my company's human resources records. I made everything hard for Deshaun, because he had made everything hard for me. Saturday morning, my phone lit up with a long post from Selena about growth and privacy. I did not respond, but Calvin did. His comment was 1 line long and defined the situation with precision. She had slept with her sister's husband. Screenshots rippled through our circle like a fast-moving storm. By nightfall, Deshaun had deleted his profile. Selena set hers to private. Extended family called with shock and allegiance. I explained what I could and avoided the rest. Sunday morning, Deshaun showed up again. He brought a bouquet of roses wrapped in plastic and apologies wrapped in a story that made him the hero of his own confusion. I texted him to leave, or I would call the police. He sent back a paragraph about marriage, and I sent back a sentence about boundaries. I called my father. He drove over and told Deshawn he would pursue a restraining order if Deshawn returned without permission. Deshawn left the flowers on the porch. I dropped them in the trash can with the same blunt motion I had used to drop his clothes into bags. Monday morning, I walked into Franca's office, a glass and steel cube that smelled like old coffee and fresh paper. I told her everything. I showed her the video. I explained the mortgage that my father paid. Franca listened and nodded. She said the case was straightforward. Documented infidelity, documented harassment, deception wrapped around finances. She asked what I wanted for Zoe. I told her primary physical custody and supervised visitation until Deshawn's behavior stabilized. She said that was reasonable. I drove to work and tried to inhabit my tasks. My co-worker, Jasmine, sat down across from me at lunch and said softly, "You look like you have not slept in a week." I told her. She put her hand on mine and said, "I am sorry. What do you need?" The answer was that I needed the world to remain ordinary while everything else shifted. I nodded and then got back to billing because the bills needed to be paid whether or not I could breathe right. That evening, I took Zoe to the grocery store. We needed milk, bread, fruit, paper towels. We turned into the produce section, and there was Selena, standing motionless beside the apples like a shadow had taken human form. Our eyes met. I turned my cart away. She followed, crying already. "Please," she said. "Just 5 minutes." I stopped in the cereal aisle. "Zoe," I said, "close your eyes and play with your bunny for 1 minute." She did. Then I looked at my sister. Selena said words about accidents that had lasted for 2 years. She said Deshawn understood her, that she had felt invisible with Calvin, that she and Deshawn had not meant to hurt me. I asked her, was it torture enough to stop? She went quiet, and the quiet was an answer shaped like a blade. "You had options every single day," I told her. "You chose this every single time." She mentioned forgiveness. She said she missed her sister. I told her the day she chose my husband over me, she also chose to live without a sister. She said Deshawn truly loved me, that he was devastated now, and I might consider giving him another chance. I laughed in a way that did not sound like me. "You are defending the man whose betrayal has also stripped you of your own future?" I pushed the cart past her and finished my shopping. At home, Zoe asked why her aunt had been sad. I said sometimes adults hurt each other's feelings badly, and sometimes they need time apart. She nodded like a child who understands more than a child should have to. Tuesday brought a new phone number and a message from Deshawn about custody. I replied that all communication should go through my attorney. He called, angry and self-pitying, and accused me of turning Zoe against him. I said the only thing turning Zoe against anyone was his behavior at her preschool and at my job and in our marriage. He said my support of him during his business failure was insufficient. I hung up. I blocked the number. The silence afterward felt like a clear room after a siren stops. Wednesday, my father called to say the mortgage company had formally removed Deshawn's name. My father was the only name on everything. He sounded relieved and also ashamed that he had believed Deshawn for so long. I told him the shame belonged to the liar, not the person who trusted. That evening, Zoe asked again when her dad was coming home. I told her he was living somewhere else, but he loved her and would see her again when it was safe and healthy. Thursday, Franca called to say the divorce papers were ready and a process server would deliver them to the address we had for Deshawn, which was Tyrone's apartment. Later that day, the preschool director, Mrs. Carter, phoned and said Deshawn was in the lobby trying to check Zoe out early. They had denied the release based on my updated paperwork, and he was causing a disturbance. "Call the police if he refuses to leave," I said. I FaceTimed him from Zoe's tablet. He answered, flushed and angry. I said, "Do not ever do that again. You can see Zoe when a court establishes a schedule." He accused me of weaponizing our daughter. I ended the call. Friday, I was at my desk working through a billing report when Jasmine came to me breathless. There was a man and an older woman in the lobby asking for me and refusing to leave. I stood because there was nothing else to do but stand. I walked into the lobby and there they were. Deshawn, dressed like respectability, and Evelyn, dressed like authority. Our receptionist, Brenda, looked like she wanted to vanish into her desk. I told them to leave. They refused. Evelyn held up her phone and pressed play on an audio recording of her son crying and saying he could not live without Zoe, that he might hurt himself. She presented this to me like a bargaining chip, a brick to be dropped into my hands. If he is in danger, I said, then he needs a therapist, not a lobby. Deshawn reached for my hand. I stepped back. You are harassing me at my workplace, I told him. Leave now. Security arrived, 2 tall men with calm faces. I said, they need to go. This is private property. We are in the middle of a divorce. Deshawn said he had a right to speak to his wife. One of the guards said, not here, sir, not when she is asking you to leave. Evelyn tried to scold me about coldness and family. I said, coldness is 2 years of lying. Security escorted them out. As they were led away, Deshawn looked over his shoulder and told me he loved me. I said if he had loved me, he would not have made a plan with my sister. The lobby doors shut, and the room exhaled. My boss, Mr. Whitaker, approached me and asked if I was all right. He told me that the promotion we had been discussing was mine, and that I could take the rest of the day if I needed it. On Saturday morning, Franca called to say the papers had been served late Friday afternoon. Deshawn had 30 days to respond. I told her about the incident at my office and at the preschool, and she said the pattern of behavior would help our custody request. Monday, she told me Deshawn had hired a lawyer who asked about mediation. I said no. I wanted a judge and a record and orders that were not dependent on Deshawn's whims. On Thursday, Franca phoned and told me Deshawn's lawyer had filed for 50-50 physical custody, along with a request that I pay him child support and alimony because I had the higher salary. I laughed in disbelief and then discussed strategy with frank seriousness. Franca assured me that with the video, the harassment, the school incident, and the rest, the court would see the situation clearly. 3 weeks after that first night, Franca and I walked into a courtroom that felt colder than it looked. Deshawn was there with his inexpensive attorney. He kept glancing at me as if he thought eye contact could rewind time. Evelyn sat at the back of the room and glared. His attorney spoke about Deshawn as a devoted father kept away by a bitter spouse. When it was Franca's turn, she asked the judge to admit a short video as evidence. The clip played. Deshawn's own boasts painted the floor. The judge asked Deshawn if he wished to explain himself. He said he had been drunk and taken out of context. The judge said even through drink, a man's values tend to reveal themselves, and that a long-term affair was not a context one could edit with a sober morning. Franca presented school reports, the building security log, examples of calls from different numbers after he had been blocked. The judge looked at the papers like they were a map leading him to a conclusion. The judge ordered that I receive primary physical custody. He ordered that Deshawn's visitation be supervised every other Saturday for 4 hours at a family visitation center with a court-appointed supervisor. He further ordered that Deshawn complete a co-parenting class and an anger management program before the court would reconsider supervision. He set child support based on Deshawn's professional earning potential as a project manager rather than his current unemployment. He issued a stay-away order, 500 yards from my home and my workplace. We left the courtroom into a gray afternoon. In the parking lot, Deshawn tried to close the distance that the judge had just given a number. I did not argue. I lifted my phone and began recording and said, "You are violating the order right now." He stopped. He stood there in a posture of despair he hoped I would read as romance. I got into my car. My father called as I pulled away. I told him the orders. He cried quietly and told me he was proud of me. He said, "You did what I did not do. You guarded your own home." I picked up Zoe and took her to a park uptown. She swung on the swings and shouted, "Higher," and her knees pitched forward like she was kicking the future open. I stood there with the sun angled through the trees and let the word free breathe in my chest without apology. Free from the housework that had been mistaken for my identity. Free from the quiet humiliations. Free from picking up the pieces from a mess I did not make. On the way home, Zoe sang to herself in the back seat, a made-up melody with only 2 real words, sky and mama, repeated like prayer. At a red light, my phone buzzed. It was a new number and a long message that began with an apology and ended with blame. I blocked it. I drove on. The light turned green, and we went forward as if that were the only direction. The days that followed were practical and strangely tender. I updated beneficiaries and emergency contacts. I called the credit card company and asked to remove his access. I spoke calmly to Zoe's teachers about pickup protocols and reminded them to call me if anyone other than my parents arrived. I set 2 chairs at the table. When Zoe asked for a third, I told her we would set one again when it was time and when it was safe. Selena did not call again. Calvin sent a brief message through my father that he had moved out of his apartment and was staying with his cousin in Durham while he figured out his next steps. I did not respond. Not because I did not care, but because I could not care for everyone at once. On Sunday afternoon, my mother came over with collard greens and cornbread and sat across from me at the table where I had once filtered roses from their thorns. She asked me how I felt. I said I felt like something heavy had been cut away and I could finally see the edges of my life. A week later, under a pale sky, I stood at Zoe's preschool fence while she ran with a girl in a yellow raincoat, their boots slapping water into tiny, brilliant arcs. One of the other mothers, quiet, kind, always early, walked over and said she had heard some things through the small-town channels of a big city. "If you ever need someone to pick up Zoe in a pinch," she said, "I am here." I thanked her. It was a small promise and also immense. In the evenings, after Zoe fell asleep, I sat by the window with the new deadbolt secured and learned how to be still again. The house sounded different. Sometimes I missed the noise that had once annoyed me. Sometimes I missed the idea of a husband. Mostly, I missed the woman I had been before I understood what was being done to me, and then I realized I did not want her back. I wanted this version, awake and unafraid of choosing herself. On a quiet Friday, I opened the refrigerator and saw the empty platter that had once held the red velvet cake. I washed it slowly, dried it with a clean towel, and put it back on the shelf. I took out butter and eggs and sugar, lined up the mixing bowls, and preheated the oven. Zoe called from the other room, asked what I was making, and when I said cake, she ran in with delight. We measured together. We stirred together. We waited together while the house filled with a smell that no memory could spoil. When the timer chimed, we frosted the cake imperfectly. Zoe licked a smear of frosting off my knuckle and laughed. We ate the first slice at the counter where I had once sat and eaten in fury and survival. The taste was familiar and also new. "Is it good, Mama?" she asked, cheeks shining with sugar. "It is," I said. "It really is." If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.